Welcome to Church and State with Chris Ferrara and Brian McCall. Nice to see you, Chris. I hope you've had a great Holy Week and Easter.
I did, thank you, and I hope the same was true for you too. I'm here on a pro-life case in South Carolina, so what you see behind me is the shabby decor of a hotel room. Actually, it's a very nice hotel. I shouldn't say that, but I'm happy to take time out from my labors in the pro-life cause to do another episode of Church and State.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it's been interesting over the past couple of weeks since last time we met. As we said, we had Holy Week, the holiest week of the year. And our first story is about what happened, a scandal that happened on Good Friday. So it's traditional for the Pope on Good Friday to make a public Stations of the Cross, usually in the Colosseum. And this year, Pope Francis did participate in that. The others had been canceled due to the COVID stuff. But this year, he did have one. But being the year of Amoris Laetitia, which I didn't even remember it was, he decided to have different people, different families, write meditations for each of the Stations of the Cross. And we'll get to the real scandal over the 13th station where their desire to be relevant, the Vatican got them in trouble. But my first thing I noticed as I looked into this is they rewrote the Stations of the Cross. I mean, I still remember when you talked about the mysteries of the Rosary, when you wrote your little book about them being changed by John Paul II. I remember one of your lines was, "Nothing is sacred to these people. They just have to change everything." So this one, for example, the first station is the agony of Jesus in the garden, which isn't a Station of the Cross, which actually happens before the way of the cross. I mean, it's the way of the cross is what happens when Christ gets his cross to the crucifixion. It's just kind of crazy. Peter denies Christ is another one. It's sort of like, let's just,
Are you serious?
I'm serious. That's number 3 is that Peter denies Christ.
I haven't looked at this, but how many of the traditional stations remained in this travesty?
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
So in any event, we get to the 13th station, which used to be Our Lord is taken down from the cross, but is now Christ dies on the cross. They just shifted that forward one. And they got a Ukrainian and Russian family. Because again, it's another bit of wokeness. If you look at this, they have one station written by a family that's lost a child. Another station, a widow. Well, that's not a family. I don't kind of get, if you're a widow, you're not a family. But it's like a family with a disabled child. It's like they're just trying to be as politically correct as possible. But the 13th station, they have a Russian and Ukrainian family jointly coming together to make their meditation. So I'm just going to read a little bit of their meditation. It has nothing to do with Christ dying on the cross. Death is everywhere. Life seems to have lost its value for us. Everything changes in a few seconds. Our life, our days, the carefree winter snow, bringing the children to school, work embraces friendships, everything suddenly loses meaning and value. And it goes on and on and on like this sentiment. Nothing to do with
usual limp-wristed commentary.
Right, exactly. And then it goes on and just nothing about Christ actually redeeming us on the cross. So in any event, they publish these ahead of time. So the bishop of the Greek Catholic Patriarch of Ukraine says, this is insulting. He said, we're in the midst of a war being invaded by Russia, and you want a kumbaya, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, a kumbaya moment of us all holding hands. This is insulting. This is you better stop, not have this Station of the Cross. So all of a sudden the Vatican, humada. Oh, forget that one. So they canceled the 13th station and just skipped it.
Well, yet another farce in the endless farce of the post-conciliar renewal of the Church. But it just shows how what we've seen over the past 50 years is an attempt to merge the Church with the world. We always recall Pope Paul VI's famous lament, the opening of the Church has resulted in an invasion of the Church by worldly thinking. We have perhaps been too weak and imprudent. Perhaps? No.
Perhaps.
Most certainly so. And there has been an invasion of the Church by worldly thinking. And it was Francis himself who said at the beginning of his pontificate, being guilty of the things that he accuses others of, that we cannot make of the church an NGO, a non-governmental organization. Well, that's exactly what he's done. The church is becoming an adjunct of the global agenda of the United Nations and the climate control fanatics and the COVIDiacs, as I call them. So now we see that
I actually call them the branch Covidians.
That's even better. The branch Covidians, we're hinting at the section on this in this segment that will relate to the problem in the state. But yeah, I mean, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the politicization of every aspect of the life of the church, and its reduction to basically a facilitator of the New World Order, as Antonio Sochi has put it. So it's not surprising that the Stations of the Cross would succumb to this. And of course, this idea of changing all the traditional stations into something other than the traditional stations. This is the modernist as reformer, as Pius X said in his landmark encyclical Pascendi. He says there is no aspect of Catholic life on which these people do not fix their gaze in their attempt to reform everything from the liturgy to theology to philosophy to the formation in the seminary. And the modernist as reformer has in fact reformed, or I should say deformed every single aspect of church life. I'm thinking of something that Locutus and Whitehead admitted in their rather ridiculous book, The Pope, the Council, and the Mass, where in the opening pages they admit that there have been changes in the church which have completely altered the external image of the church, as if this was something that could be remarked blandly as just, something that happens in the ordinary course of affairs in church history. But it has never happened that way, that the visible aspects of the church, as well as her theology, have been totally altered. And now we see even the Stations of the Cross are not exempt from this.
Well, in many ways, this is a product of the banal, on-the-spot product of the new Mass, because one of the distinguishing features of the new Mass is that idea of encouraging making up prayers, ad-libbing. Throughout the missal, right, of the new Mass, it'll say the priest says this or in similar words, or instead of this, the priest can say something else, or the most obvious example of it, the bidding prayers. Just make up some prayers here. And it creates an entire culture where we think prayer is something that is just within our control, that prayer is just whatever moves us at the moment, we should just make up. And that is the way we pray. And that then is translated into this whole idea of that everything could change. Why have these Stations of the Cross and we can have other ones?
Well, this is the idea that religion is an exercise in spontaneity, the spirit welling up from within, from the people upwards, as opposed to the church that teaches from on high to the world in keeping with the divine commission. The church that is not just the mother, but the magister, the teacher of humanity, preaching infallible truths with the authority of a divinely commissioned teacher. No, instead it's the people as the people of God, this famous image given to us by the Second Council, Vatican Council, the pilgrim people marching towards some vague destination, which includes the ecumenical unification of all the churches at some imaginary point of convergence. And this is all driven by sentiment and emotion and spontaneity and a breaking out of what Francis would call rigid formalism. Of course, he imposes his own version of rigid formalism, which is the lack of formalism, a rigid lockstep approach to demolishing anything that looks like a traditional prayer and replacing it with some spontaneous creation. And we see the results of that everywhere in the life of the church. Dissolution, in a word, is the result.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you can change the Our Father, why not the Stations of the Cross?
Right? He didn't like that age-old translation.
No.
God does not lead us into temptation, as if the prayer meant to say that God leads us into temptation. That's basically a prayer to God that he not allow that to happen, because, of course, he wouldn't allow it to happen. Lead us not into temptation is a way of saying that he will not lead us into temptation. Francis doesn't get that.
Right. Well, as you said, he doesn't have a problem talking. He doesn't have a problem talking about a lot of things he doesn't get. So, but again, the irony of it is, it just sort of shows the bumblingness almost. There's sort of so much. Oh, Ukraine's going on. Let's be really relevant and do this, and don't think about. It's almost like in their attempt to be relevant and to make things updated, they actually end up insulting people, right? That in their
I'm
attempt to
reminded
be.
of a T-shirt. I'm reminded of a T-shirt that's out there now, which says something like, "I'm a good person and I believe in the latest thing." So the latest thing would be, and there's also another T-shirt which I think I actually ordered two of these. I created it myself, but it's based on someone else's meme, and the meme consists of two panels. In the left panel, you have a hypnotist dangling the ball in front of someone. Follow the moving ball, and the ball
Right.
consists of an image of the virus, the COVID-19 virus. That's one ball, and then the other panel is another swinging ball, and that ball is the Ukrainian flag, and the subject is being mesmerized by these two balls. First COVID, and now it's Ukraine. Follow the bouncing ball, follow the swinging ball. So people are being hypnotized by the latest thing. The latest thing is Ukraine. Of course, there are no nuances to the Ukrainian situation. Putin is the incarnate evil, and Zelensky is the icon of democracy. The former drag queen comedian is the icon of democracy and freedom, when actually he's an autocrat who's put all of his political opponents into jail and silenced all opposition television channels. The usual United States installed autocrat.
Exactly. Well, maybe turning then from this, and again, I just heard off St. Alphonsus Liguori Stations Lacrosse on Good Friday where I went. They were good enough for me, but turning from this to state, yeah, I'm a little rigid, sorry. But turning to the state, we have some good news to celebrate. I was on a plane, actually, just the Tuesday of this week, when the stewardess was beside herself to announce that you don't have to wear your masks anymore. The federal mask mandate is dead. And I heard reports on some Delta flights that on Monday, when this announcement came out, that some stewardesses opened champagne and gave everyone, said, take your masks off and let's celebrate with some champagne. So I'd love to buy that stewardess a drink. But this is all due to a really a powerhouse judge. I didn't know much about her, but an incredible judge who was so accomplished that she was appointed by President Trump at a young age. Here she is, Judge Catherine Mizell, who is a judge in the Middle District of Florida. And she had a case filed before her arguing that the mask mandate of the Branch Covidians, who are in D.C. right now, was unconstitutional, illegal, and beyond the authority of the CDC to issue. And she ruled on Monday. She vacated the mask mandate and sent it back to the CDC and said nationwide it's gone, which was meant by great rejoicing, again, throughout the skies and airports of America. Great news, but you were telling me the Biden administration, they know better.
Yeah, well, the original position after the decision was handed down was, well, we'll wait to see what the CDC says. If they advise that we should appeal this, then the DOJ will launch an appeal. Well, of course, with dreary predictability, the CDC advised that it would like to preserve its power in the future to impose such a ridiculous mandate. So it instructed the DOJ to file a notice of appeal, which was filed today. I haven't looked at the docket, but I read news reports that the notice of appeal was filed. So they're actually going to ask an appellate tribunal in the 11th Circuit, after thousands upon thousands of people have celebrated their liberation from these idiotic masks, to put them back on again 3 days later or 4 days later, because this will be an emergency application. They're going to run to the 11th Circuit with their hair on fire, screaming that this is a dire health emergency and they must be given an injunction pending appeal. Now, again, I haven't looked at the docket, but the first step would be they would have to go before Judge Mizell and ask for an injunction pending appeal, which is an emergency measure. She will not grant that, obviously. So that means they have to do another brief in the 11th Circuit asking for an injunction pending appeal in the 11th Circuit, screaming that this is a terrible emergency and grandma will die unless everyone who took his masks off in the airplane puts them right back on again. And in the airports too, and in the bus terminals, and on the buses, and in the Uber cabs, and all the other public conveyances. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it should be clear to any appellate panel, no matter how unprincipled they are, that they'll look like fools if now they say, put your masks back on in the airplane and everywhere else.
Well,
I mean,
and again,
how petty could this be?
The insanity of their position. So I can go to a basketball game with 100,000 people in the stands now, according to the CDC, and not put on a mask. But then when I walk into an airport, maybe it's late at night, which I've been in an airport late at night, and there's maybe 50 people walking around, I've got to put a mask on or public safety and health will fall apart. I mean, that's the insanity of where they are now.
I'm just wondering when the public health emergency argument finally loses all of its steam, even before a panel of Democrats. Because let's face it, the entire COVID regime, and I've written about this before for The Remnant and elsewhere, is a creature of the Democrat Party. If you can manage to escape from a space that's controlled by Democrats, whether it's a locality, a county government, a state government, or of course the federal government, the COVIDiac emergency doesn't exist. People have returned to normal living, Florida being the prime example of this. And somebody on CNN, to the horror of the other CNN talking heads, admitted, it really does seem that Florida came out pretty well here, even though it never adopted any of the COVIDiac dogmas, including these ridiculous, useless masks. So what is this all about? At this point, it has to be obvious to any self-respecting judge in the 11th Circuit that this has absolutely nothing to do with public health. It's all about the Democrats winning an argument for their continued imposition of arbitrary controls over entire populations. For the sake of arbitrary controls, no one seriously believes that this is going to save lives at this point or even reduce the transmission of disease. So that's what this is all about. Let's hope we have some decent, reasonably principled appellate judges that will just trounce any attempt to seek an emergency injunction, which surely is coming in the 11th Circuit.
Now, my thinking, I actually think they're doing this for two reasons. And one you alluded to, they don't want something on record that this is against the law and they shouldn't have done it in the first place.
Right.
Again, it's kind of like the church closures. It's, a couple of years too late, but at least they're finally getting something on the record. They don't want that because they want to be able, when they invent the next crisis, to do this. But I actually think, secondly, what they're worried about is if the masks just disappear when they're saying they need them, and then we see that, lo and behold, nobody's really getting sick on airplanes. I guess we never really needed them. I think they're worried about that because it is the Florida example. Florida hasn't had masks for years and it never required them really anywhere. And they just went with the ebb and flow of cases the way the rest of the country did. No dramatic difference from, Massachusetts or Wisconsin, where you had to walk around with a box of masks taped to your face. They're afraid of the data. They're afraid of the statistics showing, when you were actually forced to drop the mask mandate, you could have dropped it anyway because it actually was doing nothing, as the data shows.
I'd go one step further and say once the masks come off, probably the incidence of transmission will be reduced. Because everything that they have done has been calculated to make the situation worse. The lockdowns did not prevent transmission. They facilitated transmission because people were forced to stay home. And so grandma got infected at home from all the relatives that were visiting grandma. And Cuomo ultimately admitted that 2/3 of the transmissions of COVID in the state of New York were in the homes where he had locked people down. So that was counterproductive. The masks are probably counterproductive because as the instructions that the CDC gives pertaining to masks admit, the masks become very quickly contaminated objects. Do not touch the mask, they tell you, but wear it on your face for 8 hours a day.
Right, exactly.
So that's obviously counterproductive. If it does anything, it concentrates viral particles on the surface of the mask or even inside the mask, so you're rebreathing whatever virus you have. The whole thing is an epidemiological and medical joke. These cloth masks never did anything. And that's the other problem. They're going to run to the 11th Circuit and say, we need to have masks back on everybody's faces in all forms of public transportation. And the obvious question will be, what do you mean by mask? Well, anything. Just cover your face. Put something on your face to make us happy. Obey. That's all we want.
Although, interestingly, because I was reading a report on this, in their mask mandate, the only mask that they won't allow is one that actually does prevent, it looks like a World War I gas mask, but one that actually does prevent the transmission of viruses. Literally, if you
Right.
read the order, that's the only thing you can't wear. Something, and again, I wouldn't recommend it. It would cost you like $600 to buy it. But if you really wanted to not be able to breathe in a virus, that's the only thing their order says you're not allowed to wear.
And even the ones
It's
that are,
insane.
even the ones that are commercially available, the only one that has any arguable, however minimal effectiveness is an N95 mask.
Mhm.
Now, the problem with the N95 mask is OSHA regulations warn that these masks must not be worn for more than an hour or two at a time because you can
Yes.
literally pass out from wearing one. Can you imagine requiring airline pilots to wear these stupid N95 masks, these dangerous appliances? Planes would be falling out of the sky as pilots and co-pilots lost consciousness.
Yes.
So,
No.
what I'm hoping is this. Let's assume they get to the 11th Circuit. They get the usual drearily predictable panel of unprincipled Democrat ideologues in black robes who somehow find a way to uphold this idiotic mask mandate and force people back into masks. Here's what I'm hoping. That the airlines will say, nah, we're not obeying.
Yeah.
The airlines could just say, we have to examine this ruling. And while we're examining the ruling and thinking about whether we should get involved in bringing in action, we're going to maintain the status quo and just say no. What would Biden do
Yes.
then? The key to all of these measures being successfully resisted is numbers. If people had said from the start, we're not going along with this nonsense. That's what Florida did. We're not putting masks on everybody in the state of Florida. That's ridiculous. We're not doing it. If everybody did that, these measures would be unenforceable because Biden really has no enforcement power. What is his enforcement power if everybody says no? Is he going to ground all the airplanes in America, all the commercial aircraft? So let's hope that if worst comes to worst, the airlines at least have enough sense to find a way to rope-a-dope it in a way and not comply while they review, quote unquote, the decision. But I'm confident or hopeful at least that at least a 2-to-1 majority of whatever appellate panel gets this will deny the injunction pending appeal. And if they deny the injunction pending appeal, what they're really saying is that Biden will lose ultimately on the merits.
Yes. And it make it moot because by the time the appeal comes around, it'll be months down the road. But really, see, this is all, and this has always not been about health. It's not about health. It's about what's been going on in China. If you've been listening to that, it's about control and power. Because here it's masks, which are dangerous, as you said, but ultimately annoying and an interference. But in Shanghai, they're using the same pretext to lock 26 million people in their homes because they've had something like 15 reported cases in a city of 26 million. And they are literally people are starving to death in Shanghai because they're locked in their apartments. If they set their foot out to go try to buy food, which isn't in stores because nobody's out to deliver the food, they get arrested. And the problem is, do you hear the Biden administration denouncing one of the worst human rights crises in history? I mean, this is equivalent to what Stalin did to create a famine to kill huge sections of the Russian population. That's what the Chinese are doing right now in Shanghai. And rather than condemning it, we want to, the people in power here want to emulate it. And again, the mask is just a symbol of that type of control.
Of course, it's a liturgical vestment, and the Democrats wear it. The Democrats wear it to show their allegiance to the COVIDiac religion, and the rest of us refuse to wear it, and so we have to be punished. And one of these idiots in a comment box somewhere, in response to the news that the mandate had been vacated, said, "I'm going to continue to wear mine for at least 5 years out of spite." And that's what this is all about: spite. This is a spiteful, petty administration that is desperately clinging to the last visible sign of its control over the United States population, simply for the sake of maintaining that control. And their rationale for taking this appeal is, well, we want the right to do this again whenever we want to. We want the right to tell everybody in America who uses public transportation to put a stupid piece of cloth on their face, which does nothing, just because we want to be able to do that, for the sake of being able to do that. How any judge can fail to see that this is political science at this point, not medical science, is beyond me. They must know
Yeah.
that if they're countenancing this nonsense at this point, they're just involved in a political operation. That's all there is to this. That's all there ever has been to this. I wrote an article saying precisely that in April of 2020. The article was entitled, "Citizen, Where is Your Mask?" I could see from the beginning that the mask was nothing more than an emblem of submission and obedience to the totalizing state. That's all it's been from the start. Common sense should have told people that these masks will do nothing to prevent the spread of a virus.
Well, and what I saw interesting, to come full circle where we started with this story, Judge Mizell, whose picture I showed, rather than actually defending their undefensible position, what I saw the liberal news media outlets do is attack this woman, attack this judge. And they say, "Oh, this is horrible, Judge. She's, first of all, a Trump appointee."
A Trump appointed judge.
That's enough to discredit her. But two, she's unqualified. So they kept saying she was unqualified to be a judge. So I looked into it a little bit. The liberal-controlled American Bar Association did claim when she was nominated that she was unqualified solely on the basis that she hadn't been practicing law for 12 years.
Right.
Was their answer. Now, this is a lady who's clerked for 3 judges, clerked for a U.S. Supreme Court justice. Right. That's the real problem. It was Justice Clarence Thomas that they were upset about. Did practice law, in a private context, and worked in government in the Justice Department. So unlike most lawyers who maybe tried one type of case for 15 years, she served as a clerk. She served at Supreme Court at a trial level, at an appellate level. She tried her own case, as a litigator, and was a government in-house lawyer, all in the matter of like 8 years. So rather than saying this is a skyrocketing career of a superstar, let's get her on the bench, that's unqualified.
Oh, you read the opinion. It's a superstar opinion, very well reasoned. It's obviously written to be bulletproof on appeal to the 11th Circuit. And this is someone who went to a very well-respected law school. Florida State Law School is a top-ranked law school. She was number 1 in the class. Do you know how difficult it is to be number 1 in the class at any competitive law school, let alone a school like Florida State, which is well respected? So she's obviously very brainy, and it's a great opinion. And I'm confident it's going to be upheld ultimately by the 11th Circuit, if not by the Supreme Court. Well, let's at least hope so. I can't imagine, again, any self-respecting panel of judges putting people back into their masks at this point. That would be just an absolute farce.
Yes. Well, we've seen a lot of farces, but let's hope not that one. So, well, great. That brings us to the end of our program for today. So thank you all for listening, and please help us by liking and subscribing to the Fatima Center channel and forwarding this video around. And good luck with your continued pro-life litigation, Chris, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, take care. God bless.